Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Spellbook from Space Cowboys. Spellbook is a 1 to 4 player game of trying to craft your spells as efficiently as possible, as you will eventually trigger endgame by crafting all of your 7 spells, and then see how well you score through a combination of different things going on here. That's the general idea. The game end is triggered as soon as one person has crafted at least one of each of their 7 spells, or I shouldn't say at least one because you can only do one. Let's talk about how this plays out. For right now, the first thing to know over here is there are 7 spells in play, 1 of each color. The spells come in 3 different levels. Let me just go ahead and show you some over here. You can see that's a level 3 spell over there. We're going to have a level 1 spell over there with the little dot you can see, and then maybe down over here we have, nope, that's another level 1. There's level 2 somewhere. Here we can see a level 2 spell over there. There's going to be 3 levels for each of the colors. The game recommends you start with all level 1s, then go to all level 2s, then go to all level 3s, and then mix and match as you see fit. And mixing and matching is where you can start to have a lot of fun with how these various combinations play out. The general idea is the game is going to go through a sequence. You're going to go through the morning, the midday, and the evening, all listed on this player aid, very easily for you to follow, and you can never have more than 9 material in your pool. Over here we have our player pool, and the first thing you're going to do in the morning, you do 1 task every day. Every phase you do 1 task, and you start with the basic tasks you can take over here, but then you can unlock more tasks. You can see these 2 spells will unlock more morning tasks, more midday tasks, an evening task, and then 2 tasks that are unrelated to the time of day or the phases of the game. So to start off, you're going to go with the morning phase. You're going to go ahead and either take 1 from the pool, from the altar over here, or you're going to draw 2 from the bag, or alternatively you can do any morning card action. I don't yet have any spells, and it's early enough in the game that I'm willing to risk it, so I'm going to simply draw 2 material from the bag. I got a purple and a white, neither of which are helpful, although the fact that I have these 3 sharing the same rune, that is helpful, because whenever you have that, you can trade that in for a while. 3 of the same rune symbol on a resource can be traded in to equal any other. That's basically it. That's my morning. We go to the midday phase. The midday phase, I can go ahead and store material on my board. So I'm going to actually go ahead and do that. I'm going to store this white material on my board, no other reason, or you can do a midday card action. And then we get to the evening, you can learn a spell as long as you have at least 3 of the same color. Spells can be learnt at any of 3 possible phases, level 1, level 2, and level 3, which require 3, 4, or 5 of that color respectively. Alternatively, you can do an evening card action. I don't have any resources, so I'm going to go ahead and take my next turn. Just for the sake of walking you through this, I'm just going to take my turns as if it's just a 1-player game over here, but normally you'd be alternating turns. At the end of your turn, you add a material to this board. Assuming there are more than 5 and less than 10 materials, you'll add a material to the board. My next turn, I'll go ahead and draw out 2 more to see if I can get to 3 of a kind sooner rather than later. We got a yellow and a white. Statistically unlikely I didn't get any of the ones I wanted, but it is what it is. I once again will store that white on my board. And then once again, I'll do nothing. End of my turn, I'll add 1 to this board over here. Let's pretend that we add 1 at the end of the other player's turn, so we're simulating a 2-person game over there. And then my next turn, I'm going to go ahead. I could draw from this board, but I'll once again go with 2 from the bag. And I have a green and a red. So making a tiny bit of progress over here. We could use those reds. We could use this over here. And then at the end of my turn, I'll go ahead. I'll store the green this time. I'm slowly trying to build up points by going around over here. One of the sources of points is by storing material each round, and some of the spells will give you different ways of storing more material. I'll add another one to this board over here, and this time we'll pretend that the other player goes ahead and takes a blue from the board, so they remove that from the board onto their own supply, and then back to my turn. I could, at this point, hope to draw a red, but what I'm going to do, you know what, honestly, I may as well hope to draw red because, well, you'll see in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and reach to the bag again, and I'm going to draw 2 over here, and I drew 2 blacks. Now, that does give me a bit of flexibility, but I think I'm going to go ahead with the reds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give in these 2 red runes, as well as these 2, the materials, I should say, as well as these 3 over here that share the same rune, which can equal a red, and then from there, I'll take 1 of these reds as a placeholder and put it down on this board over here. That gives me a new morning ability, which we'll use shortly. I'll go ahead, you know what, I'm actually not going to store material this time. I'm going to choose not to, and instead I'll go ahead to the end round, and we'll go ahead and fill that board. Once again, we'll take a look over here, see how things are playing out. My opponent's going to go ahead and they're going to, they're going to take 2 from the bag, so we'll ignore the board right now. And then they're going to go ahead, do their turn, back to me. Now that it's my turn, I have a new option that I didn't have before. I can discard a circle rune, which you can see over here, to draw 4 of anything from the bag. Well, not from anything, whatever I happen to draw from the bag. So I have a new morning action. There's different morning actions over here, but this card over here, Sacrifice, is going to let you discard cards, discard runes to draw more, and you can always use a spell at a lower level than what you bought it at. So for right now, I only have access to the level 1 spell. That's going to be worth 1 point at the end of the game, and I could discard circles. Had I built this over here, I'd have 2 points at the end of the game, and I could discard triangles or circles to draw 4. And had I done over here, I'd have 3 points, and I could discard any of the 3 rune types to draw 4. As it stands, I do have this black over here, so I'm going to take a morning action, drawing 4 from the bag, so I'm netting positive by, whatever that count is. And look at that, I drew a black circle back. That's going to be my action over there, and then I'll go ahead and store, I'll store this blue rune, and then from there, I still can't do, I did a store action. I don't have anything else to do over here, so I will go ahead and add one to this pool over here. That board's now full, so some things will happen differently. Goes to my opponent's turn. Let's say they take one from the bag. At the end of their turn, because there are 10 on this board, if they have a 10 or more, and yes, you could have more, then everything from the board clears entirely, and you go ahead and add 5 new ones to the bag. So if there's more than 5 and less than 10, you add a new one. But if there's 10 or more, you discard it entirely because it seems like those resources aren't in demand by the players. Back to my turn, I will once again discard this circle. I'll take my morning action that I started to unlock, and I'm going to draw 4 from the bag, and we'll see what we get over here. And I drew a green. Perfect. So right about now, I have a decision to make. I could go ahead and spend 3 green to unlock this spell over here. This is an afternoon action, but it has the ability to draw 1, then discard 1, or draw 2, discard 2, or draw 3, then discard 3. This time around, I'll hold off. I want to actually try to go ahead and get the stronger level, so I'll go ahead and place this down over here, and then we'll go to my next turn. I'll refill this. And this round, I'm kind of tempted, you see, because there's 15 runes. I believe, if I recall correctly, there's 15 of each color in the bag. We don't have a lot of green over here right now. We have 2 green on the board. We have 4 over here. So if I go ahead and take one of these, I can guarantee that I'll draw a level 1 spell. But I think I'll risk it. I'll discard this in my morning action. You see, because now I have 3 options. I could take 2 from the bag, or I could discard 1 to draw 4 from the bag, or I could simply take a green. I'll go ahead and draw 4, hoping to get a green. Let's see if I can get one over here. Let's see what we can do over here. I got 2 green. That's incredible. So now for my midday action, I'll go ahead and put this red down over here, and then I'll discard 5 green, and I'll put 4 of them into the pool, and the 5th one will go on a level 3 spell. And now as a midday action, instead of putting 1 onto this board, I can draw 3, then discard 3, which gives me a lot of flexibility. If you combine those 2 cards, and keep in mind it's level 1 and level 2 card, those cards aren't usually in the same board unless you start mixing up the spells. But now I have the ability to discard a circle to draw 4, which is a lot, but not precise. But I have the ability to use Cure to be able to discard, to draw 3 more, and then discard 3 more. Between the 2, I have a lot of flexibility. In fact, I'll show you how that flexibility works out in a second, because at the end of my turn, we'll add 1 to this board, and then we'll go to the next turn and see how it plays out. I'll discard this one over here to draw 4. And then I'll go ahead, 1, 2, 3, 4. I already have 3 black, which is great, but I'm going to go ahead and draw 3 more, and then using this as my midday action, and I'll be able to discard up to those. So I did draw these, so I now can discard these 3, which does give me the opportunity to use these 3 purple to be able to use this action. In this case, I'm actually more concerned with the black actions over here, because the purple is another drawing ability. So I'd have to choose either one, which isn't as strong for me. So I'm going to go ahead and discard these 3, and I'll put this down over here, and this gives me the ability as a nighttime action to store a rune. So you have all these spells and abilities going on, and the goal of the game, and at this point I'll stop going through the whole demonstration, but the goal of the game is you keep repeating this process until a player has unlocked at least 1 of each spell. Once you've unlocked a spell, you cannot do a different level. So if I unlock a red at level 1 over here, I can never do level 2 or 3. There are spells in the game that let you manipulate levels. That's a different conversation, but in general, you cannot unlock a spell once you've done so. So it's always a trade-off. Do you try to get 5 runes? Keep in mind, you can never store more than 9 materia on your board, so you have to make decisions around what you're likely to get. You have to use the various abilities to convert things, to draw specific things. This over here, take 2 from the board, I can draw specific colors if I want them on, or I can have any of those abilities if I have more flexibility. If I have the top level, I can take 2 reds from the board, using precise knowledge of what's out there to be able to draw what I need. You're doing all of that with the goal of finishing off your spells while also trying to store materia on your board, while keeping in mind that there are various things over here. This action over here, if you store, let's say, if I store this circle over here, then I would get 1 point per stored rune that matches that, and so I'd want to store as many circles as possible. The downside is if I have the same circle over here, I'm trying to discard circles, so I'll want circles for multiple things. So you do want to think about how you're trying to play out. You just want to start the game by looking at the way you can combine different spells. Ultimately, at the end of the game, you're going to add up the points for the various spells you've unlocked, add up any points for any variable numbers over here, depending what you have, add up the points for your board, which can be as many as 18 points, depending how much you store throughout the game, and that is basically how you play Spellbook. With that, let's go ahead and dive into the review, starting off with ease of play. The game is overall fairly easy to follow, very clear rulebook, very clear turn order. This player aid card has everything you need to know. Like, everything you need to know for the game is right on this player aid card. It has the amount of materia you can store, the actions you can take, the alter sequence. Basically, I could teach you the game, and this is all you need to be able to pull this out in the future and just play the game or even teach the game to anyone else. The entire game is basically on that card, past some card clarifications. There are some cards that you might want to clarify something. The rulebook has a full breakdown of all the spells. Very, very easy game to teach, to get people up and running. Plays in around 30 to 45 minutes. It does depend on the combination of spells. I've had quicker games that were in that 30-minute range. I've also had games that definitely slow down, and that's the, you know, especially if you have higher player counts and certain card combinations, you might even have games that are as long as an hour, just depending on how the game paces itself based on these spells, the types of spells that you have in play as you go through it. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like, which is in general the art, the presentation, the theme, all of that is stuff I like. I like spellcasting. I like games that have, you know, effectively, for me, if you've watched my channel, you know that I like powers and abilities, and games that are built into that formula, powers and abilities, which this is what it is. You have 7 cards, 7 spells, you have different combinations of them, and the entire game is about mixing and matching them in different ways to try to get to the end goal as efficiently as possible, as either as fast as possible or with as many points as possible, and there's a good amount of variability mixed into it because you have those, I don't even know the exact math, I'm sure it's 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, like 3 to the power 7, is that what it is? There's a large combination of variation with those spells, and it also means that you can easily, well, with a caveat we'll get to soon, but you can also easily add even more spells as an expansion and have even more variation to just what you can do with these spells, with these powers, as you try to figure out your optimal path from basically just, you know, drawing a spell, drawing 1 or 2 materia every single turn, to being able to get more and more done as fast as possible. You're going to start every round by looking at the cards you have in play, by trying to find how you want to play things out. If I do this over here, well, I might benefit from having this one over here because these two will combine nicely, but I also want to get some other abilities because you want to make sure you have a variety of abilities. You want to make sure you don't too quickly go into the same type of morning abilities or afternoon abilities because you're doubling up on the fact that you only take 1 anyways. So there's a decent amount of decision making that will happen as you start the game and start to plot your way towards victory while being sure that you can actually adjust as necessary depending on what you draw. Drawing precisely from this board gives you control. Drawing randomly from the bag gives you more, and more could be good, but you have to be able to adjust to what's happening as you go through the game. As far as what I don't like in the game, first of all, the game does have, well, not first of all, most importantly, the game has a limited number of things that are happening. Ultimately, the game is about getting materia, learning spells, and then storing materia so you can get more points. Those are the core concepts at play. And because those are the core concepts at play, that means there's a limited amount of types of things that can actually happen in the game to mix things up. There's only so many ways you can draw things or take things or store things or make things worth points. Because the overall structure of the game is limited, the amount of ways you can mix it up with spell cards is also limited, which means even within the 3 levels of spells, while there is variability to the experience as you mix and match things, at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do because the structure of the game is so confined. If you had another module almost, like to me an expansion almost needs another module of something else you're doing in the game, and then more spells that you mix and match in order to give the game more of a more not energy, more variability to the experience you're going through. The game works well at what it's doing, but it's kind of specific because there's only it's collect materia and then build spells. Those are the core things you're doing. Everything else is completely secondary, and so there's only so many ways you can mix and match and combine in order to achieve those goals as fast as possible. And sometimes, and I kind of loosely touched upon this, depending on the combination of spells you have in play, the game can sometimes drag to the point that it feels it should have ended 15-20 minutes ago. It has happened to be a few times where sometimes the combination of spells just led to things dragging a bit. I don't know if it's necessarily the combination of spells, the way things were built, the way spells were bought. Ultimately, it worked out that some games did feel like they could have or should have ended 15 minutes earlier, while other games were snappy and felt right on time for the game. As far as what I can see others not liking, luck is definitely a factor in this game. If you draw 2 from the bag, and they're 2 of the same, and they help you draw, you draw 2 green, and then you can draw the next green from this board over here. I didn't draw 2 green, but if you draw 2 green, you draw the next green from the board, you can start off with a spell. If you can get that first spell up and running as fast as possible, you can start building your engine. This card, this sacrifice card on level 1, gives you a lot of control on level 1, versus some spells you really want level 2 or 3, so if you can work your way towards that spell quickly through natural just drawing more, you can have luck of the draw in the game because you're often choosing between choosing something specific or going for luck of the draw and getting twice as much. And later in the game, that matters less as you unlock abilities. Early on, it's certainly a factor, and even later on, drawing 4, like when I drew those 2 greens over there, that absolutely changes the speed at which I can ramp up in the game and the decisions I can make, because if I'd only drawn 1, the next turn I have the same decision space. Do I try to draw a specific green from the board, or do I draw 4 more, which is a big difference in number, and so there is luck of the draw in the game. And then secondly, there's a lack of player interaction. There's not no player interaction, there's 1 or 2 spells that do things like looking at other players' spells, and you are pulling from the same Materia board, but ultimately, for the most part, the game's interaction is about you doing your own little race, occasionally lightly touching upon manipulating with other players, but ultimately doing your own thing, which may or may not be a problem for you. As far as final thoughts on Spellbook, I was excited for the game, and I still like the game. I really kind of think that my opinion comes down to that idea of having an expansion and a module, and then mixing in more spells to mix it up. That's what I think the game that I want to play is at. I like Spellbook. I've had fun with Spellbook. It's a good game. It's easy to dive into. It's easy to play multiple times. It has that degree of learning and that degree of experimentation. You play level 1s, you play level 2s, level 3s, then you mix and match, boom, before you know it, you're 4 plays under your belt, and you've only lightly started to touch the surface of what it does. The problem is there's only so much of a light surface of what it does because it's so direct as far as the ways you win. There's score spells, build spells, store materia, that is it, that's everything, that's the whole shebang. Everything comes down to those core concepts, which means I kind of want something else. I want a whole other module and board where you can do other things with the materia and where it all matters more, and there's some more agency, some more control, a little bit less luck as far as how you do things, and then more spell cards that are mixed in to be able to give you an interesting experience as far as the ways these all interweave. I think this is a great starting point for a game and a great accessibility, a great game that's very accessible for new players. For me, I kind of want the game with the next 2 expansions built in because I do like what it's doing, and I'm very intrigued by it. I'm very intrigued by it, and I want to see it do a little bit more for it to be the game that's right for me. As it stands, it's a 3.5 out of 5. I enjoy it, I like it, I recommend it. It just understand that it does have a limitation of how much is actually going on in this experience. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, Res Arcana. Res Arcana is very similar in terms of the way you have different spells and trying to work with and trying to build your best engine. Similar concepts. I think it's a little heavier as far as the game goes. I actually think I prefer Spellbook a bit more, but I think Res Arcana generally will be more popular. And then another game that gave me that same feeling of working with magic, working with resources, working with cards and powers and abilities in a way that I did and do find very compelling is Seasons. Not easily available nowadays, but Seasons is a game that has 2 expansions and has a ton of ways you're going to mix and match cards, all with the ultimate goal of trying to figure out how to get the most victory points across 3 seasons of play. Or is it 3 years of play and 4 seasons per year? I think that sounds about right. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this video helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.